I indicated briefly in my opening remarks, this gathering of speakers that we're listening to has so many connections, both social, academic, and otherwise, that last night at dinner and last few days we've been talking about how close we actually are. And last night we discovered even more connections that are completely unexpected. So this idea of networks is played out in real life as well. So the next speaker, Chris Burke, we're honored to have him as well. He and Andrea were classmates, as I said, in 80s, and they graduated more or less at the same time. And they both then went their separate ways to achieve great success, however, in very different ways. Andrea chose academics instead of football and rugby and etc. And Chris chose to go into practice and develop a large, successful company. And both of them, as you just noticed by their presence even, that they're extraordinarily loyal Purdue alum who give generously their time and money and support the programs in the school. So there's a professorship, there's a lab, etc. So Chris, I asked him to speak about how his career path is diverged and is different but successful compared to Andrea. So Chris.
Thank you, Suresh. Well, he's getting my presentation. It's even a smaller connection because being on the advisory board at Purdue for a long period of time, I was involved with trying to find someone to fill a professorship that Suresh Rao took. So, which seems to be, innocuous by itself. But in the process of Suresh coming to Purdue, he left a void in Florida with Jim Jowowitz filled. Now you're thinking, who cares? Well, I was on the advisory board at UIC, and lo and behold, 2 weeks before the semester started, they asked me to teach at UIC. That was 18 years ago. And over that period of time, I not only took the course that he taught, but also fluid mechanics and hydraulic design, and now the senior design. So 18 years later, I'm still teaching because of this connection that went in full circle. As Elder Leopold, the Round River, I suppose, is the connection there. So yes, Suresh said I graduated about the time of Andrea, and that's not exactly correct. We graduated exactly at the same time in the same place, and I'll show you a picture here in a second. I'm going to talk about applications in urban hydrology. So it's going to be mundane. There's no very straightforward, and I'm talking about the different solutions. All right, so we graduated together in May of 1983. I'm looking around the room. Some of you were not born in May 1983, and that's a picture. That's a great picture. So on your far right is Donald Gray, who was my major professor, and Andrea's on the left, and Eldo Giorgini is in between us. Eldo was Andrea's major professor, and he was also my major professor's major professor. So they both they're no longer with us. Donald Gray passed away last year. Very unexpectedly in great shape. But you can see that we were filled with confidence. I mean, let me just tell you, there was nothing that was going to stop any of us, and it was because we were so well trained here by Dr. Delur and Dr. Sinha, who prepared us in the variety of courses like advanced hydraulics, 641, 642 advanced hydrology. We were well prepared to tackle anything that came before us. And so I thought back, so some of you may know that Purdue basketball played in Louisville last week, and I actually went to the game, and it reminded me that I was so filled with confidence that after being given the opportunity to be on the faculty at Louisville, I turned it down for some reason. I said I did not want to go on, and so I had not been in Louisville but once since that decision. So it was interesting, but we were both very, very confident. One of the interesting things is imagine a family of maybe 10 of his family came here from Italy, maybe 1 or 2 had a smattering of English, and for the graduation ceremony we took those from Southside Chicago, Irish, and put them in a very small apartment that I had, and we had a great celebration of the two families and celebration of our graduation. So those are great memories and lots of great activities. Here's what I've done with the hydraulics and hydrology that we learned. And this is in an urban area, all right? This is legacy infrastructure. There's no mulligans. There's no putting the car in reverse and taking care of eliminating the combined sewers, which we all know from hydraulics and hydrology, and only recently have we started talking about the implications of lead pipe. Lead pipes that were used not in the conveyance, but in the transmission of, not more in the transmission of the water from the street into the house, which is a major public health and a hydraulic issue. So these are the types of things. These are big reservoirs that are siphoning off water that would otherwise go in streets. We do a lot of green infrastructure related work, mundane things. These are fairly routine. This is a large, for those of you that know where the Morton Arboretum is in the Chicagoland area. This is a 15-year-old, 10 to 15-year-old pavement that has held up great, provides attenuation of flows. Lots of examples of these. So then we have to move the water around because it's too late to accommodate natural storage or depressional storage. We have to design big tanks, big pumping stations, and you can see a smattering of these. And those you don't get at Home Depot. You're not going to pick up a generator that can power 500 cubic feet per second of pumps. So you have to, these are all special made. You have to be very, have thought on all these. And these are just some examples of things that my engineers do. We have in the different groups in the company about 430 engineers or staff, total staff. So I got to do a lot of things to keep them busy. So these are pretty. These are pretty. I could show you bridges and things like that, but for those of you that have any experience with golf, this is a Medina country club where they have lots of different tournaments. So we size waterway openings on these man-made facilities. Once again, by the time we're involved with it, 100 years ago, the combined sewers were put in. 100 years ago, the channels were straightened. 100 years ago, the bellies were put in without any notion for adequate overland flow or any consideration of conveyance. Flood walls, and this is, you can see the interface between the legacy, this is the combined sewer area, but these are things that, believe it or not, you guys are going to say that looks pretty straightforward structure, and it is. But the more important thing is getting buy-in from a community that does not want to see man-made or non-aesthetic features. I'll talk a little about that. Flood walls, this is an example of a channel that used to be about 15 feet wide, shut down a major roadway arterial. You can see it's smack dab in between homes, businesses, and other man-made boundary conditions. Lots of sewer separation. There's legacy. Everybody understands the difference between separate sewers and combined sewers. The combined sewer system, everything, if those of you that know 294, everything to the east is primarily combined sewer. And in this particular case, just tackling that sewer separation, which seems so easy. I wish when we were in graduate school, they were separating it out. Sewers, they stopped for decades, and no money was put into across the country. But these are the types of things. These are tough urban conditions, not as much of a legacy as Padua and in Italy, but nevertheless, we do have many built environment constraints. So this goes to gives you an idea. You can see that the constraints that you face are all over. Now, we also have man-made. We have dams throughout the more in Indiana than in Illinois. And so what we do in my Indianapolis office, we do a lot of manuals. We generate a lot of things taking in consideration the different types of things. So the dams are there. There always is an action plan. There's a dam breach inundation method. We look at state-of-the-art modeling of dam breaches, simulating the impacted area downstream, and this is something that my Indiana office does quite a bit. They've developed manuals that outline the strategies that one takes and the dam inspections that need to be. This is some examples of those components of those particular reports and studies. Now, in some cases, there's nothing you can do. It sounds pretty cruel. There's some elected officials in northeastern Illinois that say, maybe we should just buy people's basements. Are we at that point? I don't know. With climate change and the impacts of the 100-year 24-hour rainfall event, we're talking 100-year, was just changed for the state of Illinois about 2 weeks ago. So a lot of cases we're not going to be able to afford any significant flood mitigation measures until you can see this. And so maybe we're at the point where we are buying out basements of homes because we can never stop the crime problem. It's sad that we've gotten to that point, but perhaps in the urban areas. Remember that Illinois, and I'm going to switch back to Illinois. Illinois is $130 billion upside down. I didn't say million. I ask my students all the time, and they go, $500,000, $2 million. They're off orders of magnitude. So there's no monies to start doing all these. So we also write a lot of ordinances and technical standards, and this is a smattering of the different types of work throughout the state of Indiana that my staff is involved with. Tunnels. Some of you say, hey, tunnels are over with. All right, tunnels are not over with. Tunnels are expensive, but if you're looking at a water quality issue, addressing combined sewer overflows, getting them out of the waterway, conveying them to some type of area where they can be treated, this is the type of thing that you look at. Now, Dr. Sinha taught an infrastructure engineering course when I was a graduate student. I had been at the original deep tunnel, first stage of the deep tunnel up in Chicago, and I had pictures, and he had me present those a long time ago in class. So these have been, what happened was they stopped funding them, so we have isolated. These are Indianapolis, Lafayette, and Fort Wayne have been addressing these because of consent decrees. Because if they're not taking care of the combined sewers, they're in violation of water qualities. And for those of you the few of you that don't, you can understand the idea of the urban area. Any of these deep tunnels, Milwaukee has one, Chicago has one, which is connected to 40,000 acre-feet of storage in one particular case. You build up geotechnical engineers. These are the things that all civil engineers like. You got geotechnical, you got structures, you got lots of structures, you got the hydraulics, you got two-phase flow. It's really remarkable when you start looking at the challenges of that. Then we get to Monday. I don't have any architects in here, right? No architects? So I take the opportunity each and every class to take a shot at architects. Because, you know, they get all these awards and accolades. They get people, you know, taking boat tours down the Chicago River. And they're responsible for these things. They're great concept of reversed slope driveways. Doesn't that sound like a really good idea? You park the car under. Well, gravity is when doesn't forget, and the water rushes towards those basements. And so you guys can see this idea that used to be a constant slope right down there. And so there's hundreds, thousands and thousands of these reverse slope driveways. It might have been a good idea to get them a nice award for architectural design. These are horrible. These have kept a lot of my engineers busy with the mundane. So those of you that also understand you have ADA requirements in addition to your car does not like to be bottomed out, right? So you can't have a peak in the grade. It's an interesting and especially for young engineers, a nice little project to do. There's also these big flood walls, which also have an accompanying internal drainage condition. So all these, in this particular one, the agency that built the interior drainage system designed it for a criteria that is no longer, it's like a 14-day storm. The difficulty, the pumps can't wait 14 days because the people's flood in a 3-hour storm. So the pumping stations and flood walls all have to be updated, and really interesting type things. So now we got overbank flooding. So for anybody from Chicago, this is a famous hot dog stand, Gene and Jude's. Now, I'm not so sure I would have been eating there the next week, but you can see that, or certainly having someone handle it. But you can see, as I say, there's a time and a place, and I rep for trees and a rain barrel, right? So just to be clear, I'm the chairman of the board of the Morton Arboretum, one of the largest in the Midwest, and that likes you planting trees, and the chairman of the Conservation Foundation, that also sells rain barrels. So I think rain barrels and trees are great, but not for solving problems like this, all right? These are enormous problems. There's nothing that's going to take place to accommodate these chronic flooding problems, and so they rebuild. So that's an issue that we have. And nobody in Chicago did I hear all summer, all winter long, blame somebody else for the snow, right? No one ever blames someone else for snow. They say, I live in Chicago. But when it rains, they want to blame someone. They always blame the gatekeeper, the municipality. I've had mayors say, are you crazy? Why in the world would I ever shut a valve to flood out all my residents? I want to be elected next time. But there's always this thing about there is somebody to blame. So here are the challenges. One of the things I've said is the legacy infrastructure. Not in my backyard. Everybody wants a flood control problem. Everybody wants sustainable or renewable energy as long as it's not in their backyard. Up in Illinois, it's a big push for solar. Everybody loves solar. I love it. And I love wind turbines. But put them on your property, not mine. Put that flood, can't you move that flood control? Can't you do it? We've had over my career gymnasiums, high school, junior high, gymnasiums filled with people on one side that want to solve the problem, the other one that want the solution to be moved somewhere else. Funding, I've already talked about that. I already talked about the fact that sometimes there's no projects that are ever going to be economically viable. Elected officials, we had that issue, and go figure, their level of commitment. A lot of them are UWT grads, okay? I've already established that we're proud Purdue grads. University of wishful thinking. They're hoping that it's not going to happen on their watch. And they, when nothing, sometimes, hey, I haven't gotten flooded since you painted the signs, what does that mean? Painting signs means nothing, but people want to attribute dry weather to some of that. The term 100-year flood. People say, hey, I flooded last year, I'm going to redo the basement because I'm 65 and I only got about 25 more years of life. So that is so we've tried with the 1% ISO risk line, forget about it. It's, forget about it. Or trying to relate the 100-year flood to the probability of winning the lottery. I don't know about you, but there were about 4 groups in my office that no statistics, no probability, and sure the heck bought a lot of lottery tickets last week. Quantifying scale. Local scale, like those reverse driveways, to that large scale overbank flooding. And adapting to the impacts of climate change. It doesn't help me when I tell someone that you have a 5-year level protection for the sewer out and within the region that you live in, right? And now I'm going to say, hey, I was wrong. It's 2 years now because the statistics change. It doesn't really, you still are going to, you have a flood-prone property, and being able to change that. Public officials, in Illinois, we got park districts, we got school districts, and we got a municipality. They all represent the same people, but they want to pile on. If the community wants to put something in there to flood control, they want to extract it. They're extracting from the same citizens, and it's just, but this happens more than you can imagine. The approach, we apply all these great things that Dr. Deleur drilled into our heads: steady, unsteady, continuous simulation models, economic assessments, making coherent and understandable public presentations and getting participations, and of course the really interesting two-phase flow aspects of tunnel hydraulics. Going back to that deep tunnel, when they first put it in, as the water rushes in, air rushes out, right? Air rushes out, and as air rushes out, it doesn't know that it can come off these vents and these shafts and blow things apart. And that's what, when the early days of the deep tunnel that happened. So these are the types of things that we do. The rewards over my career, I get people that thank you for the fact that they no longer flood, that they no longer have to buy flood insurance, that they no longer have to dam up, literally, dam up their garage with those architectural wonders. And so those are the types of things that we've put in, tens of thousands of acre-feet of storage. It's also gratifying because it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. I've worked for an engineering company right out of graduate school that every day they did the same reservoir simulation model. What am I going to do today? Well, exactly what I did yesterday and what I did 2 weeks ago and 2 months ago, simulating these large hydroelectric power plants in a lot of different places. Interesting enough, they're still doing it 35 years later, and the reservoirs and hydroelectric power plants are still not designed. But it was a full-time employment for some of these people. Nevertheless, these, for those of you that pay attention to international issues, the Guri Dam in Venezuela has recently been in the news because of the operation, or really the lack of maintenance on that dam, and that was the dam that the company I worked for. But certainly doing what I do has a beginning, a middle, and end, and of course interacting with all these people that we've had a chance to get contact. So that's it. So why I got, am I on time?
Wonderful.
Pardon?
Yeah.
Perfect, good. So he told me, he gave me a short time, and of course I wanted to just let you know these are the types of things the engineering firm that I have and work with and does with the education we got. So, and I still teach thanks to Jim. Thanks a lot, Jim. I told them 1 semester before they hired, and everybody that they've hired has had issues in fluid mechanics, and I'm still, I don't know how many semesters later. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's great to see Andrea. I sent Andrea the videotape of our graduation ceremony, and my cousin, who some of you may know, Thomas, he got his Ph.D. here, as a 14-year-old videotaping, not his family, my family, but also the entire ceremony that we went through. So any questions? Any questions?
Of course, thank you, Chris.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
So we're not taking questions. Are there?
I'll take questions.
Sorry.
You got a reverse slope driveway? So, anybody been on these architectural tours in Chicago? How many guys like O'Hare? Anybody like O'Hare?
No.
So you like O'Hare Airport? Now it's more important right now at O'Hare. Jim remembers this from me in Chicago. There's a competition for the architecture of the new terminal. No one has said whether it functions okay and you can get to your plane, but there is a big competition right now, and it's filling up the newspaper with aesthetic issues. So.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
I see in my sort of blogging cycle as earlier. I read a lot about the dam failures in the Midwest, and I haven't heard anything in Indiana. Maybe because less rain or more dam safety inspection. Other states also, they have dam inspections too. But there are a lot of breaches, a lot of failures you may have seen.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a lot of failures in the in levees as well throughout the Missouri River. And it's really the level maintenance and a lot of those farm levees that were maybe designed for the 50-year flood will continue to fail, as well as those smaller dams. Iowa has a lot of those smaller dams that were built, legacy dams that were constructed. We do a lot of dam removal too, which is a big issue. Andrea talked about the index of well-being, or whatever index you want to use for species diversity and numbers. So we do a lot of that, which is you're going to see, especially on these urban dams that have been there for 100 years, serve no purpose for hydro, they have no purpose for nav, no purpose for anything except aesthetics. And a lot of people are tied heartfelt to those. And there was an article this morning in the Tribune about a family in Shorewood that had 2 family members die in this recent flood as a result of the dam. So, but yes, the Indiana, has a rigorous program. They have a finite number of dams, but they do require inspections.
Other states don't?
As not as much, and there's more. The density of the population is less.
There is no federal requirement.
There is no federal. And most of the dam safety regulations are propagated and enforced at a local, statewide level. So, okay. Right in time.
There is a question from Antoine in the back.
Yeah, I thought I was out of time. Thank you for the talk. I guess it's more of a almost personal question, maybe more suited for dinner or beer, but since there's a lot of students, you mentioned you had an offer at Louisville, and then you went into industry, obviously, as we all know. And maybe talk about your decision points and why you went into industry, and as a graduating PhD student, I guess.
Well, at first I thought I was going into academia, and we were all, Lyndall Ormsby, one of our classmates, had gone to Kentucky. G.B. Loganathan, a year earlier, had gone to Virginia Tech. For those of you that don't know, G.B. was my office mate for 2 years. He was killed at the Virginia Tech shootings. So everybody had gone. I don't think Demont Sabir, I don't think she went into academia, but most of the people were pursuing. I just decided, maybe it was because they suggested I was going to have to teach statics and dynamics, and the shock and all of that. That's probably not the case. But I just decided, my father was a civil engineer. He had an engineering practice. My father died when I was in graduate school. The practice was sold. So I did have that experience in that, and I wanted to go back to Chicago. Little did I know that Jim was going to leave, many years later. But so that I did teach right out of school at night at Illinois Institute of Technology. So I was teaching. I had the opportunities to teach as an instructor here at Purdue, and I loved it. So I wanted to do both and perhaps take the advantage of both opportunities.
We are glad that you went private practice, so we can get the benefits. Well,
that's nice of you to say that. My wife is very happy too. But we certainly, the only thing to the graduate students, both my children went here, got their masters in water resources. The one thing I regret is they couldn't convince them to go on for their PhDs. So Dr. Sinha is the same as Dr. Lur. Our children stopped at their masters in water. So, but stay on for your PhD. I tell everybody, and so.